So, we're designers, so we see it that way. But yes, design has played a role in thinking, like when I watch a documentary and I see, the colored restrooms or the colored water fountains, my thought is a designer had to think about that. They had to physically draw separation of people based on the color of somebody's skin on a set of blueprints.
Hi there. I'm Katherine Given, Senior Style and Market Editor at Luxe Interiors and Design Magazine. I am joined here by Seth Stevens, the Chief Designer for Kohler and Callista Luxury Space. And today we're doing a deep dive into the beautiful world of Kohler Cast Iron and taking a look at why these pieces are so great in the kitchen. Hi, Seth.
Hi, Catherine. So grateful to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. I'm excited to chat with you. So I know there is a lot of history, when it comes to cast iron and Kohler. Can you give us a little bit of a background?
Yep, absolutely. I'm really excited to specifically talk about cast iron today because a lot of people know, but a lot of people may not know that Kohler's history was actually founded on cast iron. So it's a pretty cool thing to be discussing today. And one of the reasons actually when I started that I got really excited was about the history and heritage to cast iron. They invented the first bathtub, which is what put cast iron on the map, quite frankly, in terms of bathroom design and bathroom aesthetics back in the day. So that's a pretty cool part of history. And also the fact that the company has existed for 148 years. So again, 148 years. So it's pretty incredible to think about that there's 148 years of technology and information and resources and an experience in creating the cast iron that you see today from Kohler.
Wow, that is such a cool history. I didn't realize that. And for me, there's sort of like this nostalgic element about cast iron a little bit, but I know today they can also, it can feel quite modern, but besides the aesthetics, it's really great to use in the kitchen because it's very durable and it's very strong, right? The material.
I agree, incredibly durable and will last. And Kohler's cast iron actually has a lifetime warranty. And I love what you said about bringing up aesthetics because I have a little bit of the same nostalgia and same feeling about cast iron. I always think of it in that very like classic nostalgic way. However, it really has transformed. I mean, cast iron today in terms of aesthetics ranges everything from traditional to the full-on modern and can be used in multiple aesthetics in the kitchen.
Yeah, it certainly has evolved. But I think what's also a component to cast iron is this sort of sustainability aspect because all of these products are made from recycled and reclaimed material, right?
That's correct. And I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. And a lot of people may not know that also. But yeah, 80% of the content and material is from recycled material that's used in our cast iron today. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that's really top of mind for a lot of homeowners, right? They want to know what's going into their products. They want to know that, they're sort of having an impact, on what's happening around them. So, kudos to you guys for doing that. So
Thank you.
Seth, I know you've mentioned this to me before, but it's really all about the mix, right, in the kitchen and incorporating elements that hit a lot of different notes. And, can you discuss style and aesthetics when it comes to using cast iron and even maybe mixing in some other elements, like surfaces and faucets?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's also one of the incredible things about Kohler Company is their depth and breadth of brands and portfolio that exists within the entire Corporation, which allows homeowners and clients and customers to be able to really customize their space, everything from surfaces to the faucets to the cast iron. And I think that's also what makes Kohler unique is that it really does span that entire aesthetic stance, right? So it goes everything from that modern to traditional. And a lot of what we're seeing in design today has to do with not being one way or another, or it's really about that eclectic mix and match of, we get into two-tone finishes, for example. So, with the Kohler tone faucet, for example, it's made up of those two-tone finishes. So, looking at how you can mix finishes, so much today is about, again, having that eclectic mix. So being able to choose items that have a range of finishes or be able to mix and match finish options, I think is really important and really speaks to that customization of space.
The Whitehaven apron front sink is a personal favorite of mine, but Seth, can you walk us through some of the other designs?
Absolutely, and love that one as well, Catherine. Yeah, so we have three really prominent designs right now. The first is Whitehaven. Whitehaven is really our most traditional item from the three, and really harkens to that classic aesthetic. And next is Iron Ridge. Iron Ridge is a little bit more modern farmhouse take on that classic original. And last but not least is our newest launch, which is the Riverbee. And the Riverbee, what makes this one unique is really all of these chef features, which includes a cutting board, a colander item, and some other accessories that make it really functional and beautiful in the kitchen.
So Seth, I know Kohler Cast Iron is offered in many different options. Can you talk a little bit about these styles and designs?
Yes, absolutely. Again, Kohler has blown it out of the park in terms of their range of finishes, finish options, and color options. And this makes us unique in that you can really span, from this really modern to more eclectic experience. For example, items change so much based on their color, material, or finish. A cast iron sink in white, for example, paired with a polished chrome or a polished nickel gives a really clean, modern, minimalistic look. However, you could go super bold if you wanted, and you could, pair our indigo cast iron or a lavender color with our bold tone faucet in the two-tone with gold and black, for example.
Yeah, it's amazing, as you said, Seth, just switching out one thing in your kitchen, whether that be a faucet, a sink, even a surface, um, completely transforms the space, right?
Totally agree. Yeah, I absolutely love when that happens. It's like a simple makeover just by changing one item. I think the item itself can change as well. Just seeing a faucet in a singular finish, like the tone faucet in a singular finish versus its two-tone finish, completely changes that item.
Seth, you are such a pro. I feel like you sort of see it all in the kitchen. Can you share anything else sort of about, your approach to design, or sort of, when you're in the kitchen, how a homeowner might approach it, whether it's, looking at cast iron, fittings, faucets, surfaces, or whether you, look at finishes first. Just, I'd love to kind of pick your brain and hear a little bit more, a little bit more about how you approach kitchen design.
Oh, that's a really good question. So honestly, I think I really start first and foremost with classic kitchen layouts. There's a reason why I think that was probably created, a very long time ago, in terms of where some of these items are located in terms of efficiency and how the kitchen is used. So honestly, for me, I really start at a floor plan perspective, and everything kind of grows from there because I'm first thinking about how the space is going to be used and how it's going to function. And then after that, I start getting into, oh boy, diverge converge is one way to describe the process, but essentially really pulling tons and tons of imagery and starting places, and obviously the imagery can be collected from a multitude of places, including Lux, and looking at what's happening, but really like pulling all that imagery and then starting to put together, what'll end up being like a full finish palette. So that's going to be color, material, finish, get out on boards, and then getting into the actual designing of the space. So for me, there's a lot of thought process and prep and understanding of how a space is going to get utilized and function before I actually start to break it down into, finishes and specific items.
Nice. Yeah, I think, right now people are obviously living in their home more than ever, renovating their home, especially, these hardworking spaces like kitchens. And it's interesting to see, what people are picking. And I do think, coming back to cast iron, there is this sort of nostalgic element, but when you do install, sort of these newer Kohler designs, like River Bee, like Iron Ridge, it sort of instantly feels modern. So I think cast iron's pretty, singular in that it sort of spans both bridges, which is interesting.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah, and it's actually also making me think about your last question, which is, what are the aspects and items that you think about when designing the space? And the durability piece is key, right? And being able to trust and rely on the quality of product that you're placing in your kitchen environment. Kitchen isn't really a space to be messing around, right? Or where, I mean, you need these things to be reliable and to function as well as be absolutely beautiful. And that is one of the things that Kohler also really takes very seriously, which is, investing a lot of time and energy into all the functionings of how these items look. Yes, they're beautiful, but they're also incredibly durable, whether it's cast iron or it's, or it's the Crew faucet or the Tone faucet or Simplice or any of our best-selling items. But there's this whole team of engineers and people behind this to really make these things that last.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about Kohler is that they really consider the entire room, right? And not just the products, but you're looking at surfaces, faucets, sinks, sort of everything, as you said, that, helps in creating these functional spaces. But thanks so much, Seth, for chatting, about Kohler Cast Iron, and I know what you're seeing in the kitchen, how you approach kitchen design. I always love hearing your insight because you're such a pro. You've seen it all.
Thanks so much, Catherine, and thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it, and this has been really awesome. Thank you.
And thanks to our viewers, and stay tuned for what's coming up next on DesignTV. Bye.
Hi, I'm Laura Seymour.
I'm Matthew Day Jackson, and we're in our studio in Red Hook, Brooklyn.
I started with event planning and event design, and then I went into fashion design, and now I do ceramics. I've been doing it for about a decade. It sort of has evolved into a solution. I'm always thinking about what is it that we need and how can we make it interesting and how can we then put that out in the world, and it's inspirational. It makes for interesting product design.
I've been a practicing artist for 20 years. I moved to New York because I thought that was a place that you could be whoever you wanted to be. I was right in that estimation. My crashing into design, necessity breeds invention. And early on, I was making furniture just simply because I didn't have any money and we needed a table, or I wanted a chair for the studio, or this, that, or the other. And it turned into, like a fairly rigorous activity and something that I enjoyed a lot. Kind of like a break from sculpture, not in that it was easier, but rather that I could practice utility rather than thinking about meaning.
Just being around, you see creative uses of space everywhere. There's some people in the building next door who are musicians, and they were playing the saxophone at like midnight, and I thought, somebody in a suburb might complain about that. It felt really exciting and inspirational, and there's such a cross-section of artists and designers and performers.
The activity of other creative people doing their thing and trying to make it happen, that's home for me.
Ceramics can be built by hand or thrown on a wheel. It's sort of a whatever needs to happen to make the item. My work is in an online shop of my own.
My main interest is really dining tables and chairs to keep people around each other long enough so they can learn as much as possible and enjoy each other's company for as long as possible. My relationship with Future Perfect is pretty new. There's a company in Finland that I work with called Made by Choice. I think that in general, as artists and designers, I think that what we do, we're constantly building upon our sort of forebears. My job is to pay the best attention that I can to my experiences as I'm having them.
Hello, I'm Helene Oberman, Managing Director of Interior Design Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to Product Live. This is our series that delves into the products and trends grabbing the industry and in real time looking at the minds behind the design. For over 50 years, Roburn has been the source for designers, architects, and consumers alike, seeking out the finest in modern cabinetry, vanities, mirrors, and lighting. Roburn elevates the everyday routine to the extraordinary and continues to set the standard with its unparalleled craftsmanship, cutting-edge innovation, thoughtful approach to design, and uncompromising quality. With me today to discuss the brand is Seth Stevens, Chief Designer for Roburn and Kohler Luxury Spaces, and Devin George, General Manager for Roburn. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So jumping in, it's really interesting because when I think of Roburn, I think of it as one of those well-known, little-known brands that designers may know of or may know the products, but somehow don't always know the name. And Seth, you actually have a funny anecdote about that.
I do. Yeah, it's actually funny that you mentioned that. It's a very relatable story. I was actually visiting a friend of mine's home in the Hamptons that they had recently renovated. And at the time, this was almost 4 years ago. And I had actually just started with the luxury sector of Kohler Company. And that obviously includes the Roburn brand. And when I had toured their home, they were showing me, obviously showing me the entire space. And when I had said that I was representing Roburn, they're like, "Oh, we're not familiar with Roburn." And then when we had gotten to any of their bathroom spaces, by the way, but particularly the master bathroom, the entire master bathroom was filled with Roburn product. And I was like, "Well, this is Roburn. This is actually Roburn brand. It's in your home. This is the product." And they're like, "Oh, we love Roburn. We love the brand. We love the quality. We love these medicine cabinets and mirrors." So yeah, it's just it was a perfect example of, how people may have or use or utilize or have Roburn in their homes and might not even have that brand recognition. So it's pretty funny.
Well, we're here.
Love that story.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're here today to hopefully change that fact. But, what really sets Roburn apart from all those other companies that have products in the bathroom sphere?
For me, from a design perspective, it's really about the quality and craftsmanship and what has gone into each individual product that's been made for Roburn. Each product is hand touched by one of Roburn's employees, working in the factory and helping to make these products. So I think the quality and the attention to detail and the craftsmanship really stand out.
Sure, yeah, I think to add to what Seth is saying, we have a 50-year heritage. We're based out of Bristol, Pennsylvania, and I'm lucky enough to actually work in the office with people who build our products. So we have our design team in there, we have our engineering team, our production team, customer service. When a customer calls about a product, I can actually go talk to the person who designed it, the person who built it, who shipped it, and we can help that customer. So it's really a family feel. And I was just there yesterday, so we're all working from home right now, so I'm only in a few days a week. But I was in yesterday. It was so nice to just walk the floor, and I was really thinking about this interview and thinking, how much longevity do these folks have? And I can't tell you how many people I talked to that were 25 plus, 35 plus years, and there's just this pride. And I'm so proud to be part of Roburn. I'm so proud to be the general manager of Roburn, and you can see that with our employees as well.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, for the company, it's not just about the products. It's really about those people, and whether it's the designers with whom you collaborate with, and obviously the amazing folks who have been crafting the product for 50 years. And it actually started, so little known fact, I love it that it was founded in Pennsylvania by, well, I was going to say husband and wife, but maybe it's a wife and husband team, right?
Yeah.
Of Rosa and Bernie, hence Roburn. And I love the fact that legacy.
Yes, yeah. In fact, several people that I talked to yesterday knew Rosa and Bernie well, worked for them. Our entire design team actually trained under Howard Katz, who was the original medicine cabinet designer of the medicine cabinet that we launched into a home in New York City in 1968. So it's really has a beautiful heritage.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of New York, I mean, while the company was founded and is based in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of connection to New York. And New York really was sort of the source for some of Roburn's most innovative products.
Oh, absolutely. So we are a medicine cabinet provider, and who needs medicine cabinets more than metropolitan spaces that need to optimize their storage? So New York has been inspiring us and helping us understand what customers need nationally from the beginning. And I might turn this over to Seth to just talk a little bit more about what a designer needs in the space. But for Roburn, it started with the luxury medicine cabinet. Nobody was offering it on the market. But then we learned that we could make those cabinets modular, almost like building blocks into a space that could fit into any design. So we, from our start, have really been creating medicine cabinets that we could continue to innovate over time that were relevant to the market.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. You know, it really had to do with, you know, what was happening in New York, not only what was happening in New York at the time, but at that time, Roburn was very innovative in that it was the first company to bring these modular solutions to life. Mm-hmm. And this obviously made a huge impact and was really important in the design community at that time and when it was happening, particular to Manhattan and New York and those of us who have lived there for many years. You know, space is always been, you know, a really high valued
commodity.
It's like, you know, every square footage, especially in a bathroom, is really important. And we're going to store all of those items and how they're going to get laid out and organized. And Roburn really created this innovative system at the time of modular solutions and how to organize essentially your life, you know, and make your life manageable and be able to store all of these important essentials within a Manhattan lifestyle. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, speaking of obviously modularity and customization, you really have one product, I think, that exemplifies the best of what Roburn does, and that's the M series. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, yeah, the M series is one of our original products designed by Howard Katz. And Roburn really stands for is small details and meaningful innovation. It's not about anything showy. You literally have to open the cabinet door to see all the small innovations inside, but it's about the little things that change your day-to-day routine. So this is an example of a cabinet that I actually have in my home. And I'll be honest, my very favorite part of the cabinet is this little magnetic strip where I'm obsessed with tweezing and unfortunately tweezing and little scissors all the time. And I would lose those because I would bring them everywhere. And now every time I'm done, I just store them right there on that magnetic strip. And I think from my start at Roburn, I probably need to replace them. I've still had the same pair of tweezers and scissors that I used to use monthly. So it has that, but many other features. It has interior lighting for if you walk in the bathroom and you don't want to wake up a partner, but you want to open up and see what's in your cabinet. It has electrical outlets, USB ports, a lot of little things that just make life easier because you can just plug in your hairdryer, plug in your toothbrush without having all those cords on that wet countertop.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because it's about all those little details that you don't necessarily think about, but when you have them, you're like, oh my gosh, why did you not have these before? So well, we should definitely dig into some of the newer products that actually have a lot of those same sort of features. One of them being an extension to PL Portrait, which I know is your most popular medicine cabinet. And I actually was just curious, like, why change a good thing?
Yeah, well, so PL, we have had in our line for over a decade, and it is our, as you mentioned, our most popular product. But we always have to keep relevant with what customers need. So we really stay close to our customers to understand what does this product not have that they want. So for PL, it's always been about modularity and those building blocks together and offering many sizes so that really the designer can design a piece that fits their vision. But with the new product, we added more sizes and then more relevant, small, meaningful innovations.
Well, I mean, gosh, it's like completely customizable, totally flexible. Like, that's absolutely amazing. But that also continues with your next new product, or new product extension, I should say, which is the Uplift Tech, which I know, which something is amazing is that it really is tapping into the power of, well, when I was reading about it, power of good lighting. For someone who puts on makeup, that's important.
Yeah, so Uplift Tech is based on our Uplift line, and we just upgraded it to have tunable light. So you can buy Uplift with or without light. The one with tunable light is white light that you can tune from a really cool light to a really warm light. So if I was getting ready in the morning and I knew I was going to the office, I would put it on the cool setting so that I could make sure I did my makeup in a way that looked good in office light. Or even daytime light if I'm going to one of my son's soccer games. If I was going out for a date with my husband, which happens less than I'd like these days, I could then go to the warmer setting thinking I'll be in a restaurant with some dimmed lighting and really make sure the lighting fits the need of wherever I'm going.
Mm-hmm. And something else that I really noticed about the Uplift Tech is like you really thought about like materiality and the metal finishes. And, you know, we all know that designers like to customize and, you know, match whether it's the hardware with some of the metal finishes. And I know that is an important detail that people think about.
Yeah, the design team has spent a lot of time, looking at all the metal finishes and developing them and making sure that they coordinate within our own luxury sector of business. So for example, with our sister brand Callista and with the faucets that exist within that line, and make sure that there's this ability to perfectly match them or create like a mix and match solution, pairing these things together to create, the perfect combinations. Additionally, these items will pair with everything kind of in the marketplace in terms of where designers are pulling items from and bringing a full story or design of a bathroom together.
So, as a reminder, Roburn is part of the Kohler Co family, and it's nice that you can have a very harmonious sort of bathroomscape, based on some of the Kohler, Callista, I'm sure all the other Kohler brands that you're bringing into your bathroom.
Absolutely. And I also love that all of Roburn's items, even in the PL Portrait, or even if you're looking at Uplift Tech, I think what's really incredible is they can stand alone and exist within, a purely modern aesthetic, or honestly, they could be paired, with the PL Portrait, for example, if you don't pair that with the gained lights, which is a more modular, that modular program and a more streamlined modern aesthetic, without that lighting and pairing in and bringing in other lighting from, again, maybe Kohler lighting or some of our brother and sister brands, it can really change the overall aesthetic of the entire room.
Yeah. Well, lastly, I know you have a new member of the family, which is the mag mirrors. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, to actually jump off of what Seth was saying with finish matching, we recently introduced a line of magnification mirrors. So there's freestanding versions, there are wall-mounted versions, lit and unlit, and many of the models are available in several colors. So again, to finish match and make sure that even the mag mirror in your space is coordinated with everything else. It's not just a functional piece, it should be an aesthetic detail that really adds to the design of your space. So we're very excited about the launch of our mag mirror line, and we're getting a lot of good excitement about it.
No, it's great. Well, no, I mean, that's the thing is I think for quite a long time, people didn't think about those specific details as much in the bathroom. You think about it in other spaces. And it's nice that you guys really put so much thought, and obviously the flexibility, the customization, the personalization, right? Because that's what people want in their bathrooms and a lot of their spaces in their homes right now. So one really interesting feature though that we haven't touched on about the PL Portrait is this IQ digital lockbox, and actually how it came about, because it's really about this idea of safety and security that's really much needed right now.
Yeah, so much of what I think makes the Roburn brand special has to do with the heart that goes into the design and development of all their products. And the Lockbox, digital solution Lockbox is no different. This was really born out of the opioid epidemic and the need for being able to lock up valuable things, including prescription drugs. This, in typical Roburn fashion, is beautifully and sleekly designed, and it is incorporated into the PL Portrait series, which is one of our top selling items. And every attention to detail was spent, as it always is, to each of the design elements and making it clear and easy to use and function. And one other really cool aspect of this item is that it actually connects to our app that was designed with the rest of our items. And if something should happen, there actually is a notification that's sent to that app.
That's amazing, really is, and so much needed right now. So while like the Roburn products that you have within the family are quite customizable, you actually offer to the A&D community the idea of customizing products specifically for the commercial market. So can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yes, absolutely. Roburn, again, truly excels at anything customized. So they actually are creating items for some really well-known projects in Manhattan currently, and continue to work on really high-end, really specialized, customized projects to the trade commercial space. So yes, again, that attention to detail, the ability to create custom sizes in this market is something that Roburn really excels at.
Yeah, we have specialists in glass and metal, and with that, we get a lot of nice custom opportunities. And we have a dedicated product manager. We have a dedicated engineering team who actually works with the architect and designer to figure out what do they need for that space and how do we make the perfect product for them.
So definitely a designer out there who's looking for something sort of custom for a hotel project, or multifamily developments I know are really big right now as well. Like they should definitely think about Roburn.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd love to work with you. Yeah.
Well, time goes quickly, and I have to say, Seth and Devin, it was so great to really have you guys on today to really discuss and really get the Roburn name out there so people and designers really remember who you are, and of course, those amazing products that you offer. So thank you so much for your time and for your insight. And of course, to our lovely audience out there, please make sure to check out the Roburn website to learn more about the brand and their products. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Metropolis Think Tank Thursdays. I'm Tina Brennan. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Metropolis. We are very pleased to be hosted by Open Studio Architecture in Denver, who will be discussing how branding, messaging, space layout, and furniture can support change management in organizations as they focus their attention on collaborative spaces and amenities. Hosting an event like this requires the support of great firms like Open Studio and our incredible sponsors. So we'd like to thank CertainTeed, show-stopping ceilings and walls that achieve the extraordinary for every space and every budget. DuPont Tedler, PVF film for every surface worth protecting. Growy, designing and engineering innovative water products for bathroom solutions and kitchen fittings. Kimball, designing the spaces where you can work your way. Mannington Commercial, crafting flooring with purpose for more than 100 years. And Versteel, a solutions provider of American-made furnishings for working and learning environments. And now I'd like to introduce you to today's moderator, Metropolis's editor-in-chief, Avi Rajagopal. Avi?
Thank you so much, Tina, and thank you all for joining us for today's discussion. You know, in March, when most of us in the United States finally took the decision to start working from home, I think many firms and many workplace experts across the country immediately went into high gear trying to understand sort of what people's perceptions were about this workplace shift that was taking place and what some kind of return would look like. And one finding that's remained consistent actually through the year has been that most employees prefer a hybrid work situation post-pandemic, in that they would like to spend some of their work time outside of the office and some of it in the office. And then, you know, again, another consistent finding for, you know, what people wanted, what people look for in the office has been, you know, collaboration and social connection. So it's clear that, you know, if offices are going to make some kind of change, you know, post 2021, then that change will be in terms of how they handle individual workspaces versus collaborative workspaces. And broadly speaking, I think the pandemic has really pitted individual needs versus shared or communal needs, whether it comes to you know, resources, whether it comes to air quality or health. So there's definitely an organizational shift coming. And you know, today we're going to talk a little bit about how design can be part of the toolkit of solutions in terms of helping people weather that change, helping organizations weather that change, and really coming out of the pandemic with maybe an improved work environment that better fits the needs of both employees and employers. To help us talk through that today, we have a fantastic group of panelists. From our host firm today, we have Laura Mears, who is an architect with Open Studio Architecture. Laura, such a pleasure to have you today. We also have with us Abby Reese, who's a senior interior designer at Open Studio. Abby, thank you so much for joining us. Also with us today is Shahana Wis, who is the senior director of real estate and facilities at Angie. Shahana, such a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And Justin Croft, who's the vice president of development at Zeppelin Development. Justin, such a pleasure to have you with us today. I'd like to start with a question to Laura. Laura, this has been a year of change for most organizations. What are you anticipating for your workplace design practice at Open Studio? And how are you working with clients through adjustments or plans at this time?
Yeah, it certainly has been a year of unexpected challenges for everyone, and we've learned a lot. And while we are still learning, as everything is very much still evolving, and I don't think we can predict the long-term impact with certainty, but we have a lot of ideas about what that future workplace will look like, and really even more questions. I do think the key is flexibility and the ability to adapt. I think that's been key to being successful in the remote working environment, and it's going to be the same when we re-enter the office. And you know, what we all thought might be a few weeks of working from home is easily turning into this 1.5-year long experiment. So what our practice is currently discussing is what that return to work will look like, possibly later this summer. And we're trying to return to some sense of normalcy and regain that cultural aspects, especially that are so critical to our tight-knit group. That's been one of the bigger challenges for us at Open Studio, is maintaining that unique culture virtually. We're a group of just 20 people, and we're used to catching up with each other at the espresso machine in the morning or having beers after work on our patio. And so we've missed a lot of those big milestones in each other's lives and just the day-to-day knowing what people are doing. But we also want to take the positive aspects of this remote working experience and use that to grow and evolve and thrive in a way that pushes us forward instead of just returning to working the way that we always did in that pre-pandemic world. And every company is different in how they work and how they've adapted and what their culture is like and what their operations are going to look like moving forward. So there's no one formula that's going to work for everybody. What we're realizing is for some, the office is the place they go to collaborate with their team. And for others, it's where they go to focus because their home office is full of distractions, whether they have roommates or families or pets interrupting, or or they might go to the office to focus for the internet connection or the server connection. And so we've all had those technology challenges as we adapt as well. And so the office needs to respond to all of these things. It needs to have the technology to really facilitate those hybrid interactions, because we're expecting, even once people are back, there's going to be a lot of meetings where half will be in person and half will be viewing remotely. And so how do we make sure that these spaces are fostering the experience for both of those people at the same time? So what we started with as a company were surveys and just first getting a pulse on how everybody was feeling about remote working, and then to get feedback on returning to work. And so we're asking questions like, what do you like most about working from home? What is sacred about the office? And so we're making some tweaks to the office in response and not touching those sacred things like the espresso machine, but we're going to move to hoteling rather than assigned desks. We've always worked in a very open, collaborative setting, all at one long benching table. And so we need some space in our office with more privacy and place to focus. And we also actually need more space to collaboratively work, even though we're all in one room, we're at desks next to each other. So we need more just casual gathering space. So we are making some shifts in our furniture to kind of test out a beta test for those zones to foster those experiences. And that might be like a 90-day test, and we'll see how it goes. And we can shift because we're not doing hard construction shifts right now. We're just testing these zones in a flexible way, which is what we would recommend moving forward, is making sure that you have the flexibility to adapt to when we immediately return, but also 3 years down the road when hopefully the pandemic is long for, distant memory. And so what we've been advising our clients is to first decide what their company policy will be in their office towards remote working versus in person. And then we can help plan their space in a way that best facilitates that. So an office with more of a remote working population is going to look a lot different than one that's going to require everyone to be back in person. We think a lot of companies are going to have more of a hybrid approach. So blending the best of what worked previously and what works well remotely will help define those spaces moving forward. But it's really going to be up to the company to define how they work, and then we can help them plan what the best space is for that function.
Thanks so much, Laura. There's so much in what you just said. First, of course, your point about culture. That culture is really at the root of the problem we're discussing today. Organizations are looking to preserve their culture, to nurture their culture, to evolve or grow their culture. And how does this change contribute to that? The other thing, is this idea of individual preference, but then there's also, needs that particular teams might have. So, depending on what your function is within an organization, your needs or your preferences might look very different. So thank you for reminding us of that. So I think this idea of, and then of course, experimenting with something like hoteling, doing it in a sort of phased and almost like iterative or prototypical way makes so much sense. This idea of keeping a loose fit is a great lesson, I think, for all of us to learn in workplace design. So thank you so much for that, Laura. I'd like to bring Shahana in here. Shahana, you have offices not just in the United States, but in other places in the world as well. Tell us a little bit about Angie's experience with remote work this year. And if you can, tell us just a little bit maybe about how you're thinking about collaboration as a factor in whatever plans you're making.
Sure. Thanks for the warm welcome, Avi. Happy to be here today. We spent several years finding, designing, building a gorgeous HQ building in downtown Denver. And we were there for less than a year when we, all of us, mid-March, were starting to hear news and we headed home. And so we were in our space for a little less than a year. And like you mentioned, we have other offices throughout the US and beyond, but this was our real, kind of flagship, our HQ office. And the immediate needs were, how do we get everybody home? How do we get them the technology that we need or they need? And how do we keep everybody connected? And while we've been home, I think collaboration is still so necessary. You lose out on that, like Laura said, the espresso machine or being able to gather in a conference room. And so much like everyone else, we've been able to really rely on technology to successfully bring us together. As we're looking to return to the office, there are new challenges, right? So we have beautiful conference rooms, beautiful furniture, beautiful design. Everybody loved to be in them prior. However, I think, as we return, we're going to have hesitation and probably not even allowed in a lot of the cities where we are to gather in conference rooms. And so luckily in our space, we also have a lot of open area collaboration spaces. And so I think we're going to really have to rely on those spaces more than what we typically considered, if you're getting a team together to meet, where you would go typically would be a conference room. We're going to have to set up some of those like open air, if you will, within our open space collaboration areas. And so with that, we already have Zoom on the TVs in those spaces. And, we've already kind of prepped for that. But I think now that that's where the majority of meetings will be held, we have to take into consideration also like acoustics, right? So if there's one team meeting right next to another team in an open space, we're looking at it a little bit differently than thinking that the vast majority of the meetings were in conference rooms. So that's some of the challenges that we're working on, is really being able to rely heavily on some of our open rooms versus the closed conference rooms, at least initially. Ideally, we'll move back in, but at first we're going to be looking at our conference rooms as maybe single person offices or just dual person, like a small huddle room, large room for 2 people, 1 person.
I love that flip of like, what were formerly collaborative zones kind of now becoming, basically shared, private space. That's really interesting. And then of course, converting open air social areas into spaces for collaboration, as you said, is not a simple undertaking. Acoustics is one factor, certainly. And that's really interesting as well. So it almost feels like one is looking at the layout of the office and really looking at, these minor shifts in programming and usage, understanding that there's a limit to, the kind of long-term change that you want to make to the space, that kind of flexibility that Laura was talking about. Yeah, that's really interesting. There was also one thing that Laura said that I meant to pick up on and didn't, which was this idea of sacred things in the office. I love that idea, Laura, and maybe the audience will want to pick up on that too. It's just, I've never quite heard that asked that way before, what is sacred about the office? And I'm thinking about what's sacred about my own office. Everyone in the audience, of course, we're ready for questions. We see at least one question in the Q&A box already. We're going to start taking those in just a few minutes here. So please get your questions in, and we love to have a lively discussion and involve all of you in it. Justin, I'm going to turn to you now. We've heard from Laura as an architect of a space, and of course, Shahana as someone who manages that space for Angie. But as a developer of office spaces, Zeppelin is in Denver. I'm sure you've been looking at this trend of, this increased attention on amenities and shared spaces for some time now. Has the pandemic shifted your focus or kind of focused it on your attention on particular amenities or particular sort of benefits that you provide as the owner or developer of office space?
Thanks, Avi. Yeah, I would say it's really created a lot of specific focus on what we already have, what we have offered our tenants, for some time, and really where is the value. And I'll give a few specific examples. So just by way of background, Zeppelin Development's been active in Denver for about 40 years. And we've sort of made our name pursuing opportunities in development that maybe other developers aren't paying attention to. So working in overlooked urban core neighborhoods. About 20 years ago, we started building out what is kind of our campus, our commercial campus. It's mixed use. There's some residential there as well. But it's a 28-acre campus along the Platte River, just north of downtown Denver in a formerly industrial area. It's called Taxi because the site was originally where the yellow cab depot was for the city. So it was a small kind of mechanics building and dispatch area, and then a bunch of parking behind it. We've been developing on that site now for 20 years. We've gone from the original Taxi building, which in 2000, when we built it, we created some of the first kind of open format creative office space in Denver. We actually burned down a pile of cubicles at the groundbreaking. And so I think, it's so interesting when you fast forward, this far, and I think we were starting to see some backlash against truly sort of open, highly dense shared areas before. And so we have historically always built kind of individual demised offices within each suite. So part of the way that we're approaching kind of the evolution of office, or even the future of office, is it gets back to the things that are deeply fundamental to the human experience. And I think the idea of the sacredness of work is such an interesting concept, right? I mean, it's very much like an important piece of your day-to-day. And I think what you're seeing with people coming back from working at home for so long is the things that make home work so well as an office environment, they need to be able to still have some of those with them when they're moving to the office. The flip side, which Laura brought up, is people need to be able to focus. And I think so office needs to provide that ability to focus, but then needs to have amenities that really sort of support your lifestyle. And so at Taxi, because it is a campus format, 10 buildings, 150 companies, many in the creative sector, lots of architecture firms and designers, but the world has moved beyond the early adopters for creative office space. You're seeing a lot of kind of traditional firms as well, law firms and even accounting firms. What we've been able to build up over time is amenities like there's an early childhood education center at Taxi. So the idea that a lot of our tenants are able to, drop their kids off in the morning and even have lunch with them during the day. That's something that parents experienced at home, and I think realized how amazing it was to be able to connect with their kids more often. At the same time, they need to be able to focus and get on a Zoom call or meet with other folks and not be interrupted every 10 minutes. So it's kind of this idea of the best of both worlds where you have amenities. We have a gym on site. We've got a ship and container swimming pool on site. We have independent food and beverage. There's a restaurant. There's also an independent cafe. And our campus is also filled with native landscaping. And so this idea of common spaces where people can meet up that are outdoors as well as indoors was really inviting before, but has become even so critical now. We actually started building green roof patios on one of our newer office buildings. So you can walk out on the third floor of a building with the skyline and the mountains behind you, but you're kind of outside, feel safe, and you're enjoying the outdoor environment. So again, kind of getting back to the fundamentals, what is it that COVID has sort of refined in allowing us to focus on those things that allow our tenants to have a great lifestyle while they're coming back to the office?
I love that. Thank you so much, Justin, for laying all that out. It's really interesting because when I look at this, this statistic that I see often, that about 60% of employees want to turn their work life into some kind of a hybrid between working from home and working from the office. It almost seems like they're trying to do what you're talking about, have the best of both worlds, but kind of do it over time, over a week. So they're like, fine, some days, fine, I'll do the thing where I go to the office. Some days, fine, I'll be at home and I'll be able to take care of the kids. But I think what you're suggesting is that, those two things happen better and simultaneously at both the workplace and at home, right? So we don't have to force people into this choice of, well, I have to work from home today because I've set this up in this way, but I happen to have this call and now, all that kind of stuff, right? Which is what a lot of us who are looking at a hybrid work situation, those are the things we don't have an answer for, right? And so I think that's really fantastic. That's a really interesting way of thinking about sort of, hybridizing the office itself to a certain extent, and having a campus, of course, makes that easier. The other couple of things I want to say, childcare, again, is a huge priority. Most people are guessing it's the thing that's keeping a lot of women from coming back into the workforce. And that's going to be a really important factor. It was, I would say, kind of not prioritized enough before we went into the pandemic, and hopefully a positive change we're going to see is to see that being prioritized. So that's really interesting as well. Is in what kind of amenities do we now provide that can make a material difference to people's lives? And I think it really takes that amenities war, arms race that we were in, before the pandemic, and kind of grounds it in the realities of people's lives. People's priorities are very clear now because of the pandemic. Abby, I'd like to bring you in here and focus on maybe one aspect of what we're talking about, which is that, that collaborative space. You've heard Shahana talk about that, the challenges with setting up a successful collaborative space in offices. And yet, as Justin and Laura were both saying, that's one of the key reasons why people come to the office, right? It is to experience that culture by being around other people. So how are you thinking about workplace experience for folks changing, coming into the office post-pandemic? And what are some of the things we have to keep in mind as we're setting up collaborative spaces, whether they be physical elements, but also maybe some conceptual frameworks that we have to keep in mind?
Yeah, well, thank you, Avi. Very, very good question to kick us off. I think from a designer's perspective, and when we're tasked to curate that ideal employee experience, I think the hardest task is really to make it sure it still feels authentic and true to the culture of the company. So generally we're starting with those deep discussions with the leaders of the company and the organization to make sure that that definition of employee experience aligns directly with the message they want to send back to their employees. So, this definition really should come from them and not me. So a lot of that first beginning deep dive is really just conversations that we have to support the narration of that, and certainly be empathetic to where we're all at, since like Laura said, there's not one size fits all. So it is really about those deep dive discussions that we really have to take seriously right now. I mean, companies are now being given this opportunity to evaluate internally and to determine, what kind of culture do they want to adopt, or like you said, salvage, as this part of this transition or re-entry. So that ultimately that has the ability to attract and retain talent now from all parts of the world, which is crazy to think about now, which is another shift we can certainly talk about. But the employers, it comes down to that choice that they have to make. Now it's the launching point when we have this first discovery phase of the client. Now we get to open up with, okay, what did you decide? Are you full return? Are you hybrid? Are you fully remote? This now becomes the major driver and starting point of our conversations. And then Laura says, ultimately now then that just starts to describe and prescribe how these spaces are going to ultimately impact the overall user experience. We've had a year plus experiment, so to speak, to extract kind of what's working, what's not working. And then now we can really start to reimagine and implement strategically into that workplace design. So personally, it's a really exciting time to be a designer, because I think we're now back to the heartbeat of what companies, get to discuss about. They get to decide what's important to them, and they get to reevaluate that, and we get to be at the table with them to help guide them. It's coming from them and not us. We're there to really help spatially and through all these different elements. With collaboration, it's hard. The word successful, again, always, I think that's also determining on the type of work people do, the type of collaboration that's needing. But it does cause a little bit of challenge that I hope maybe we can get more into in the next hour or so. But collaboration revolves around the power of that human connection and interaction. So as designers, we need to effectively design these settings now for hybrid, in-person, and virtual connection, so that not one person is at that disadvantage, yet do it in a way that feels authentic and natural and organic. So anticipating at any given time, you'll have a percentage of occupancy attending virtually. But then how do you do that? What do you do about spontaneous collaboration that occurs by meeting in person, running into them in the hallway, and they say, oh yeah, I need to talk to you about that. And then before you know it, it's 30 minutes of conversation, but that one person working from home has completely missed out on that conversation. And so, instead of coming to you with what makes successful spaces specifically. I'd rather present you with the challenge that we're faced up against as designers and conversations that we have to have with one another to make sure we are being authentic and we are being true, not only to the culture, to the experience, but also these collaboration moments and that human interaction that's so critical to every aspect of, you know, work life, home life, all that good stuff. So, you know, it's an exciting time to really look, you know, at the heart of what collaboration means for each organization, how, you know, we can make certain pivots to ensure that we're supporting the new shift. So, like I said, very, very exciting time for someone like me who can be part of that table discussion and share a little bit of that empathy of what's happening, because it's certainly multidimensional and affecting us in a lot of different ways, mentally, physically, the whole works. So I'm excited to be here today and to elaborate more on this.
Absolutely, Abby. I think there's a couple of really key things in what you said. I think one is, of course, culture. And if we reflect that back into what Justin was talking about or what Shahana was talking about, you know, it's pointless having, you know, an early education center if you're the sort of company where people don't really take like coordinated lunch breaks, and there's lots of companies like that, right? So what's the point, right? Or it's no point setting up you know, amazing acoustically sound sort of shared common area for people to work in if you're the sort of company where teams don't like to have their work process on display in front of, you know, other people. And there's companies like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just every company has its own culture in terms of, you know, how they share work process, how they, you know, normalize sort of work balance and things like that. And so those things become really key, as you said, to get right first before you even think about, you know, how do we collaborate. So, you know, going back to those fundamentals is really important. And then, you know, as you said, you know, designers don't decide what makes a successful collaboration. Companies have to do that, right? And I would say, to connect it back to what Laura was saying, well, companies have to do that based on what their employees tell them. So we come back to that, you know, that information gathering and that survey. And, you know, I filled out my employee survey just last week. And, you know, I said the one thing I miss is being able to walk by someone, say hi, and then end up in conversation with them, right? And that's really, that's the kind of magic that, you know, maybe we're trying to find ways to capture. To your point about, you know, how do we look at the complexity of a hybrid workforce, and that some people might be at home and some people might be in the office. That's actually our very first audience question. So I'm going to save it for that. And we are going to dig deeper, as you said. But before we jump into the audience questions, we're going to have another quick poll question up for our audience. So if you don't mind, take a couple of seconds and respond to that for us. That would be great. As Tina said, we're gathering information from the A&D community on a variety of topics here. So we'd love to hear from you. And while you're doing that, quick thank you to Open Studio for bringing all of us together today, as well as to our sponsors, Certainty, DuPont, Tedlar, Grohe, Manhattan Commercial, Kimball, and Verseal for making today's discussion possible. And another reminder to everybody in the audience, we're here to take questions. We're here to hear comments. You don't need to have a perfectly formed question. If you have a thought, if something you know, triggers something in your head, go ahead and put it in Q&A so we can bring it up for discussion with the group. We'd love to hear more from you. Let's take one of our audience questions here, because I think it connects directly to what Abby was talking about, and I'm sure it's something that, you know, Shahana, you're dealing with as well at this point, and you mentioned it in your comments as well. Stan Tang says there are so many aspects or impacts with a hybrid work model. One that I want to discuss is, will there be a stratification of staff, that is those who are here versus those not here, and particularly regarding face-to-face bias on influence, voice, advancement and promotion, aside from the usual line versus management dichotomy? Should there be a minimum required presence, right? So FaceTime is important, not just for this wonderful thing we call collaboration, but also, you know, for people to get promotions and raises and like get land, you know, for them to land projects and do all the things that, you know, they usually do, you know, through their interactions with other people. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I'd love to hear from all of you on this. You know, how are we thinking about how hybrid organizations might make that work, you know, in the new normal?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm looking at as a challenge, and how do we address this? And, I was actually having this conversation with Abby and Laura yesterday, that I'm sure tech companies are, nose to the grindstone trying to come up with new solutions to address this. But we inevitably, now there will be people in the conference room or face-to-face, and there will be a contingent that will be at home or wherever on any given day. And how do you make it an equal playing field, that the people that are on the TV, on Zoom, don't feel like they're just watching everybody that's sitting at the conference table? How do they really feel like they're part of it? And so, one thing that I've been thinking about is maybe rather than having the TV at the front of the room and everybody is turned, and then, but if I'm talking with somebody in the conference room, then I turn this way and my back is to everybody else remote. And this is something I think, a lot of companies already do, but rather than having one focal point TV, having smaller screens at each spot at the conference table. And I think that will create a little bit, although it won't be super natural when, you're talking with people in the room, I think it will serve to bring in the people that are remote a little bit more, and make them feel that we are all on a screen still. And make them feel that they're part of the room.
Avi or Laura, any cues on sort of how we bring a hybrid workforce together? How are you thinking about that for your own office?
Yeah, I think one thing that came up during our survey and kind of our internal discussions about coming back to work is with the challenge of hybrid. So what works really well now, that because we're all working from home, is we're all available in the same capacity. We all can be on Slack, on the Zoom call. We're experiencing the same level of engagement and accessibility. Then when we're all back at the office, we all have that together. So the challenge is when it's split up, and then you don't have that duality or that similarity to share with one another. So again, it only works when it's on. And that's just for our office. That was the challenge that we ran into. And so one strategy we thought about is mandatory same days. So maybe it is just everyone's back Monday through Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday is remote or optional. We ran that idea. Of course, there's pros and cons to every one of these scenarios, but I did want to share a little bit of that because it really made us think about what's working, what's not working, and how potentially we could create that hybrid and it would work for Open Studio. But again, going back, it really only worked when we were all at home together or all in the office together. So we're really up against that challenge currently. Can't say that we've solved it quite yet or what we're going to do, but I thought it was interesting that the idea of maybe it's the mandatory same days came up, and we were evaluating that as a team because I really hadn't heard that or thought through that a little bit more. But yeah, just something to kind of also think about how to equal out that in a luxury when we're all in Denver. Shauna, you're in a different situation because you are, you have offices all over, and you will always have that challenge of having different users and different employees in different ways. So yeah, just one side of thing that made me kind of come up and think through of, yeah, we've kind of talked through some of that stuff ourselves and are still learning.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I think, again, making the decision at team level rather than organizational or individual level, like, saying that maybe teams mandate, which days they come in mandatorily or so on. I mean, that's really interesting. Laura, you were going to come in.
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought I would jump in too. I do think that's a really good point, and a challenge about the hybrid is if you have that lack of face-to-face interaction, there is just this natural bias towards people that you do have more face-to-face interaction with. I think in management eyes, and when you're looking at promotions or just having that FaceTime with your management or with your boss or however the company is structured. And so I think that a hybrid solution, and it might be different for each company, but if you're going to have it be optional to work in the office or at home, maybe everybody does choose some kind of blend. If you do choose to be all remote, your ability to be moving up the ladder in your organization, it's possible that may suffer. And I think, again, it might be different at each company. But then you can decide if that's a trade-off that's worth it for you with the flexibility of having, time at home, having more work-life balance, having, no commute, whatever it is, there's always trade-offs. So I do think that is a downside of not having the face-to-face time, not just with the culture of your company, but with the management of your company, and having, just that natural inclination of if you're going to be bonding more when you have that face-to-face connection. So it might vary by the organization and whether or not they're how much they're fully embracing the remote work, but certainly a good point to think about.
Absolutely. We have a question that just came in, and I'd love to hear from all of you on it, and maybe Justin, you want to comment on this as well. William Bernard asks, how much are you seeing a boost to the healthy buildings narrative that have higher fresh air exchange, better filtration, while maintaining sustainable goals for energy use? So, part of, I think, how we bring people back into the office, even for those mandatory days or for that hybrid work, is going to be with a value proposition for the office. And I think, as part of that, there's been a lot of talk about, will employees feel the trust to come back into the office? Are there going to be employees more sensitive to health concerns and things like that? So is that something that you're thinking about long-term? Is it something that's even, in the conversation for any of you, with whether it's with tenants, with your management, or with clients?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that question. So it's definitely something that we are seeing as a concern among tenants who are visiting our spaces and thinking about whether or not to move into taxi. We historically have this is a very low tech sort of solution to this, but we've historically put glass garage doors on nearly every office suite we've built at taxi. Part of that is taking advantage of Colorado's dry, really, pretty temperate climate. And so that's something that was always an attraction, but has become doubly so now, with folks who maybe they're in, a high rise in the central business district. They feel sealed into that space. And I think the idea that they can be on more of a kind of horizontally oriented green campus with a roll-up glass garage door where they can naturally ventilate their space. Again, it's a very low-tech solution, but it just feels, I think it adds comfort for folks who are coming back to the office.
Yeah, sure. Any other thoughts on sort of the healthy buildings kind of movement, or even air filtration systems, or other aspects of sort of well-being in the space?
I think we've seen a trend towards healthy buildings in general, just lately, but certainly after the pandemic, I think that the ventilation and the mechanical is something people are paying more attention to. So I know that we have current clients that are in design right now that are enhancing their mechanical system with the filtration that makes their space healthier. So it is something that I think people are definitely looking at. Will everybody go to that model? Like we'll see, but I think the trend will definitely, especially when it comes to air quality, be at the forefront.
Yeah. We have a question here about, Laura, something that you brought up right at the beginning about hoteling. Tina Aula asks, can you talk a little bit about hybrid work models and hoteling? She's also asking about sort of the mechanics of how it works, with computer systems and so on. But I'd love to kind of take that more generally. Have you all considered hoteling, and what are some of the considerations in terms of making that work when people return to the office?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think that our office is fortunate that where we already had laptops as our main platform. So that made our transition to remote, and I think our transition to hoteling easier in some ways because we already have that portability. But what we're planning is we have a separate monitor and the keyboards and everything in your docking station all set up in our desks that will become now just more free address instead of assigned. And so I think it will work pretty seamlessly with that hoteling option. And we're going to have alternative places to work in the office as well. So maybe some high top community tables or lounge areas where the idea would be it's easy to take your laptop and go away from your desk to some of those collaborative zones or focus zones. But I think that even if you don't have laptops, I think it could still work you would just have the desktop set up there, and then perhaps it's involving some kind of networking where you log on. It's not your personal computer, but maybe it's more of a shared computer system where you have log on that anybody can log on, and it can become anybody's computer. So I think that you could work with that either way. And we have the open office benching systems, but I think even with a private office, you could even take a look at that. And we are planning in one of our current clients in their space. It was a space that we started designing before the pandemic, and they're still moving forward, but it's a building ground up under construction. So the timeline is long. And we haven't really changed a whole lot of the plans spatially, but what they've talked about is operationally how they're going to use those offices and desks. And so some of the offices are hoteling spaces, some of the desks are hoteling spaces, and some of them are assigned, and they're still working out the logistics too. But I think even in a private office, either it becomes something that you can check into virtually, where there's some kind of, again, technology is key with all of this working seamlessly too, but you can check out an office and maybe it's a different office each time, or maybe there's just like 2 people assigned to that office and you work between the 2 of you who's in what day, or perhaps it's an office that you can occupy a couple days a week, but the times you're not using it, maybe it's not anybody else that comes and uses, maybe it's like a conference setup. Maybe you have a desk and you have a meeting table and you have your personal things locked up in your storage. But then the office is available when you're not there for people to use it as a meeting space. So I think there's a lot of different approaches that you can do with it. And there's not just like one thing that you have to have laptops. And I think it can work creatively in a number of ways.
Yeah.
I would love to spin on that a little bit too, is also with the idea of hoteling and coming in a portion of the time is kind of like what Shahana's faced with, is redefining how spaces are being used and clearly communicating that back to your employees. So we have to now redefine how to use a conference room, redefine how to use a living room setting, and also that etiquette plays a key role in this and making them feel successful and being sensitive to the type of use that they're re-intended to be used. So say, for instance, a phone room, maybe that's a little bit different. So you have to reintroduce a phone room to your employees all of a sudden, so that it works relatively seamlessly as a re-entry. That's going to take some retraining, because I think, you work so hard, especially a company that's been in the same space over and over. I mean, for many years, you're going to have habits and behaviors that are just set, grounded in, but that's going to take some time. And maybe just by the time you get used to that, we're shifting in another direction altogether. But I also think just behavior and etiquette and being respectful and empathetic to the new situations, giving cues when you're in a private setting. Is there a signal through the design, through the furniture that can say, okay, I'm not to be disturbed, I'm in my ample focus mode? I mean, giving people permission to have those boundaries and having management and communicating that as far as a new way of behaving in the office. Again, just as a new set of standards, but it does affect etiquette and behavior, and I think it should be taken very seriously, because it is truly what's going to get people back to the office in a respectful manner and in a successful manner.
Yeah. Shahana, I'm wondering if, can you tell us if you're thinking about this kind of change management process at all with your organization? I mean, are you looking at putting up signs or sending out memos, or how are you communicating to folks the changes that you're making?
Sure. So it is going to be a massive shift for us. We've always had one-for-one. Everybody had their private office or their personal desk, and we never had any hoteling or hot desking in any of our offices. And we've recently, as everybody is conducting surveys now, we've recently conducted a survey. We've determined that a large portion of our employees would prefer to not be in the office 3 or more days per week. And so what this is going to look like for us, what we're leaning towards doing is keeping our team areas, right? So like teams were always obviously, put together, but within those team environments now, the few people that do want to come in, maybe 3-4 times or more per week will have their private or their personal desk still. They'll be assigned a desk. However, we'll convert some of those desks to hot desking. And so if you do come in, 1, 2, 3 days a week, you can still sit with your team, but it won't be in your personal desk. The other way that we're doing it, because we have so many people that are interested in coming in a hot desk environment, is that we are going to just create a sea of desks, if you will, that are purely for hot desking. So maybe you need to escape, 3 roommates or a young child that's getting a lot of your attention, whatever it is. Maybe you just need to come in and do some heads down work. So we'll have both collaboration within your team environment, but then also just an area for you to work independently as well. We are, as far as communication and kind of the change management aspect of all of this, we're instituting a eating reservation system. And so you'll be able to select which hot desk you're sitting in rather than kind of come in and see what's available. So I think that helps in terms of being able to know what you expect when you come to the office. And the other thing that's really important for us is being able to create that environment. We've talked about what's been sacred at home, what have you enjoyed about working from home? And, I think most of us hopefully were able to create technology environments similar to what we had in the office. So I'm looking at 3 screens and I have everything that I had in the office. And when we were talking about creating these hot desks, we went back and forth. Is it just one screen? Is it no screen? And you're just it's just a desk and you're bringing your laptop in. And where we landed is we are providing 2 monitors. We will have universal docking stations. So it doesn't matter if you have a Mac or a Lenovo laptop or whatever laptop you have, everybody will be able to plug in. And so there won't be any restrictions as far as, well, we've reached our, Mac limit for the day. So tough luck. You have to sit with your laptop, on a couch in your lap, that kind of thing. So I think that will lead to comfort in the office, being able to feel like you're fully functional, no matter if you're at home or the office. And, I guess a little bit more to the communication aspect, we have a lot of changes to relay. And so we're not, fully through what that looks like and what that process will be. But I think more is better, right? And so it's so different for us. And so we're planning on all of the ways, right? So emails and on our intranet and, all of the ways that we can communicate, but including pictures. So this is what the desk looks like. This is what you can expect when you come in. This is what your specific team area will look like. Just so people are prepared and they know, okay, I'm leaving my comfy, wherever it is, your basement, your kitchen table, your spare bedroom, wherever it is, you've grown, comfortable or accustomed to that. So knowing what they are coming into, and I think, just by nature, because we will be home for about 1.5 years, we've done so much hiring too, since we've been home. And so while a lot of people are coming back to a somewhat familiar environment, this is a totally new office for a lot of people as well. And so although they won't have any preconceived notions of what it was before they left, as far as an onboarding to the space aspect, it certainly can't help to, over communicate with them as well.
Right, yeah. And, you probably have to reinforce the message many times over before, people get used to it. I love that idea of sending pictures and that play between, by choice, people who have chosen to be remote also, are more open to hot desking. Like that kind of a thing just makes a whole lot of sense to me. So thanks so much, Anna, for sharing those details with us. I think that was really helpful. Renard Roy asks, along with the decision of hybrid remote work and hoteling, is there also consideration to downsizing space? So, saving on rent or expenses, etc. Justin, do you want to comment on that? Are you hearing that from some of the folks in your properties? And then I'd love to hear what Laura and Abby are seeing as well.
We're definitely hearing that. And I think we're hearing 2 things, downsizing, but then scalability. So flexibility in space and in lease term is critically important to our tenants. We have seen incredible increased demand over the last 4 months, I would say, for spaces that are in the 500 to 2,000 square foot range. And the reason for that is, along with a lot of what we've been talking about, companies are bringing back specific teams, or they might be cycling them through. So they're dividing things up vertically rather than horizontally, right? You have a principal with the team that they manage that's in the space one day, and then the next day, it's a different principal, different team. But that only works for so long. I think everyone realizes that at some point it is just going to be more productive to have people together in a space. We've sort of been talking about that, like how do you sort of still create that value when folks aren't in the same space? Ultimately, I think the answer is they have to be in the same space together. And so that's where we're headed. So what we've done is we've basically simplified the leasing process to where you're signing a 5 or 6 page occupancy agreement that's maybe a 1 or 2 year term. And there's no triple nets. It's all just built in. It's very, very predictable. And with that, comes internet and furniture, those kind of things. And then when you're ready for your next space, and this is again part of the benefit of having 10 buildings on one site, we've got 3,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet with the more demised offices within that. So increased demand on smaller spaces and increased demand on flexible lease terms.
That's super interesting how square footage and lease terms kind of can work with each other to give people that much flexibility. Is anybody else thinking about or thinking with their clients about or hearing about downsizing space? Because this is something that comes up all the time, whether it's from a designer's point of view or from facilities point of view. So I'd just love to hear, is that a conversation that anybody's having?
Yeah, we're looking at it internally. We're, of course, running all the numbers. So many analyses are being done. For a lot of our, we have a large sales call center part of the business. And a lot of our sales teams are finding that they're having great success working from home. And so, while they've typically been in environments where they're in the office and enjoy, cheering each other on as they go and ring the bell as they've had a sale, I think they've been able to recreate that type of excitement or that type of team momentum at home as well. And so while no decisions have been made, it's certainly something that we're looking at. I would not be surprised if that's something that would be coming down the road. It just seems that it's not as necessary to have everybody in the office anymore. And I think this has been a great experiment, right? In that we never wanted to try it prior because it, quite frankly, seemed like it could be a colossal failure. But because we've now been forced into it and we've been, really surprised that everything's gone really well thus far.
Yeah, and I think, again, when you're looking at square footage, when you have a company that is going to transition more into a majority remote working situation, you certainly can look at reducing the square footage and you'll have less offices and less desks and things like that. But I think at the same time, you're going to have the need, especially at first, of people needing more and feeling more comfortable with distance from each other. So you're going to have those needs to be still having places to get away from your desk and still having the spacing that makes people feel comfortable. I think a lot of conference rooms are going to be used to half capacity, if they're even going to be used at all. To Shahana's point earlier, I think a lot of open meeting spaces might feel more comfortable for people that have more airflow and not tight spaces. And we're certainly not going to sit 30 inches on center apart from each other around a conference table for a while. So I do think that while you might have less dedicated office space, that me space, you're going to have a little more we space on the square footage so that you do have that distance and just alternate places to work. You may have noticed my quick background change. There's some work being done in the conference room I was in. So having another conference room to move to, you can kind of see our setup behind me of what the office looks like. But I think there's definitely some give and take. So in our open studio office, we have the same square footage and we're just making some furniture shifts. And so we're reducing some of the desks because of the hoteling, but we're instead increasing some of those collaborative zones so that people have a space to comfortably sit away from their desk. And same with some of our clients. We, the ones that we started before the pandemic and that have continued, have not reduced the square footage that they have planned for because of just the unknowns. And is in 3 years, it going to be back to where we were at before as far as density goes. And so I think Justin's point of having flexible leasing or options where you can maybe start smaller and then expand, or I think that is really interesting and really a good solution to in this unknown world moving forward.
Right. Abby, you were going to come in as well.
Oh, I think Laura covered what I was going to say. I mean, I think the fact that desking behind that you see we're 20 people and we're removing 6 desks. And that all came from this pressure from our leader to say, who owns the building, I have to make every square foot count. And so that forced conversation with the employees of what's missing, what do we need to adapt? What shifts do we need to make sure every square footage is being utilized effectively, all to kind of better the whole experience. And so I think just, again, that pressure to make sure that every square foot counts and is intentionally utilized is now a big conversation. So readapt, reuse, but then also the flexibility to bring those 6 desks back in a year. We have the luxury of just to store off-site and then bring them back. Not everyone has that luxury. So that is a huge challenge of how much shifts to make, knowing that we could catapult right back in a year, 2 years from now, which is actually not a long time from now. So not sensitive to those leaders that have to make those hard decisions. It's very, very hard to be at the table and speak to them and be, again, that's got to come from them and we can only help, but it's a very scary time to make those choices.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think, 2 things. I think hearing all of you speak, this idea of downsizing is necessarily a short-term or a flexible idea, right? So we don't know yet whether downsizing is the answer. It is some kind of, flexing that's required. And so many different components come together to make that work, whether it's space layout or furniture, whether it's, this kind of rationalization of the square footage, and then, of course, flexible leasing, as Justin said. So I really love that. I think this seems to be true of almost every flexible situation, whether it's hybrid work or whether it's leases or square footage or whatever, that really multiple stakeholders have to come together to make whatever model you pick work. It's a conversation, I think, between everybody who runs the office that makes it really interesting. We have a couple of questions here that speak to sort of employee needs and experience. Laurie Becker says, are clients requesting universally designed or ergonomic hoteling and hot desking spaces to ensure every employee can easily access these spaces? So I'd love to broaden that just a little bit to say, as we're thinking about we spaces and me spaces, how are we kind of thinking about those, that fit for every employee? Because, of course, everyone gets to make their home the most comfortable for themselves. And then they come into the office and there's a whole range from, this office is either always too hot or too cold for me, all the way up to, I have different sensory stimulation needs, or, I'm also a lot of people dealing with, various kinds of disabilities or other things, so just is this a prompt for us to think more about sort of the fit of the space with every employee? So I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that, even if you're not seeing practical changes on the ground. Just is it a concern that's in the air?
I would say, I guess it's always been a concern and an awareness as of late, especially to have, ergonomics, or to have places that are accommodating to all kinds of people. I think that now what goes hand in hand with some of these new ideas of creating more of these zones away from the desk, and I guess it's not a new idea. We've been doing this before the pandemic too, but it feels even more important now. I think it's having a variety of spaces to choose from to work when you are in the office. So, if you're having a hoteling desk, that might be one place to work, but then maybe there's a standing desk, or there's been a trend over the years anyway with the sit to stand desks. So people that already have those, that's very easily accommodating for everybody. But if you don't have those, I think just having other places to work that could be more comfortable, whether it's a standing high top or whether it's a soft seating lounge with a laptop table next to it, I think just having that variety can help accommodate. We have not solved the age-old climate control problem. I think, I don't know if there's a solution for that. I feel like that's always an issue. You have to bring an office sweater.
Well, Laura, I love that. I think it's kind of the desk's alter ego, where you have different settings that kind of go with different task work. So it encourages you to not be tied to your desk all day long, which is very unhealthy. So, the idea of removing 6 desks, but replacing it with different casual lounge setting, a high top community table, a conference room that you can check out. The key is that you're then really pumping through the circulation and utilizing that office for every part that it's really meant to be. And so giving those different postures and those choices really then allow for that ability to get up and move around, which is a lot of times kind of the underarching goal of any employer, to hope that their employees, because again, if nothing more is depressing is just being stuck to your workstation, zoned in all day long and not getting up and moving around. And so I think hoteling can also be a huge help with that as an aspect, because if your personal items aren't there, then you are most likely to move around and someday work at the high top for half the day. I mean, that's really good for you to do. And like Justin said, Denver buildings are now having the ability to work outside on patios. What a great way to enhance the wellness of the component of that. And the best world is that an office would have a little bit of everything. So it's always kind of a goal to have with our clients and our developers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Laura, for that, and Abby also especially for queuing in that outdoor space, because Justin's brought it up a couple of times, in terms of sort of green spaces. And again, in addition to ergonomics and things like that, we know that green space or views to the outdoor, daylighting, the ability to step outside can be a huge boon for people, for neurodiverse folks, of course, but also for people who might be dealing with, other kinds of temporary or permanent kind of preferences in how they work. So, giving that choice is absolutely fantastic. And outdoor space is very important part of that choice, in places where it's possible. Here in New York City, not so much, but in other places, certainly you guys are luckier. We have another question here, which I think, Shahana, you were speaking to a little, very early on, talking about both the shared spaces, but also those conference room spaces being converted into sort of, more private workspace. And it's kind of the topic we're on today, the dichotomy between me space and workspace. Tarna Gupta says, how do we address the privacy component that most people got used to and liked about working from home? According to a recent survey, 47% of the workforce would prefer a more private environment. Does hoteling need to lean towards a more private model? This was a preference that was bubbling up. As you said, Justin, there was some kind of backlash against the radically open office as well. So how are we thinking about privacy specifically as we're thinking about, workplace adjustments?
For us, this was something we were doing prior to going home, but I think it's even more relevant now. We have given everybody like a dual-eared noise canceling headset that's really, high quality. And I think, when you put it on, although, you don't have the visual privacy, you certainly can achieve, I guess, maybe not privacy, but drowning everybody out around you. And then what we've also done, we had the luxury of, just creating our space. And so we have created a lot of options where you don't have to have, calls or maybe, reviewing more confidential type of numbers or whatever. We have a lot of various huddle rooms and things built into the space. I think those are going to be even more important or more used once we return. I think we're going to see a high level of usage. We had a lot of 2-person rooms that we created that weren't, quite frankly, they weren't super popular when we first moved into the space. And I think that those are going to be some of our most used spaces now. And so I think, if you don't have, obviously not everybody can do construction and change up spaces so much before they go into the office. But I think things like, the headphones or like providing an area away from, if you have the luxury to have some desk spaces set up away from their normal team spaces, that would, provide a little bit more privacy.
Yeah, for sure. Shana, by the way, Jason Kirk says, would you be willing to share the headset model you're using? There's so many options. I don't know if you know that off the top of your head, but if you want to go into Q&A and answer Jason, that would be great.
Yep, I'll find out the exact model.
There you go, Jason. Before we move on to sort of further questions here from the audience, I just have one more thing that I'd love to return to. Laura, you were talking about sort of the connections that people have with each other in the office as well. And Abby, you circled that around by talking about culture. I'd love to just talk a little bit about that. We've been talking about collaboration primarily as a work mode, but part of collaboration is also forming that sense of community with your colleagues, with people you work with. I'm sure all of us have work friends. I know I have some very good work friends. And so, how do we bring back some of that conviviality? So just thinking beyond work as a function of the office, but also some of the social functions that the office performs. I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts on that or just any musings on that before we move on to some of the other questions we have.
Yeah, as I talked about before, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we've had with working remotely in our office, because as a small office, that is like what defines us. I mean, we are such a tight-knit group, and I know not everybody feels that way about all of their coworkers, but we truly do. Like, we really love hanging out with each other, even outside of work, or going to walk to get lunch together, having happy hours. We're just a really social group. So I think that's been a really hard challenge of the pandemic that we're all excited to get back in person to have. And so I think having those events again when you can, whether, we tried to do some over the pandemic when we could, like socially distance and outdoor, like picnic, bring your own food and drink kind of picnic last summer when the weather was still nice. But then the winter, you can't have those outside events. So we're hoping that we can have everybody be together again and facilitate some of those cultural things. One thing that we're doing right now is this, there's an industry fitness challenge, and it's all remote, but every person in our office signed up for it. Like last year, I think we had one team of like 5 people. Now, like the entire office is in. So I think we're all, even though it's not something we're doing physically together, although maybe we'll meet up for some hikes and stuff in person, but it's something we can all still be a part of. So I think we're really craving that. And I think that having those like non-work cultural things is really important to get people back in the office and get people bonded to each other. Or I know Shahana mentioned hiring all these new people. There's people that are new to the office and haven't met coworkers in person. And I know we've been in that boat too. We've hired people that have started remotely. And so I think that having some of those cultural activities will be really key to just getting the bonding back we've had before, and the new people to bring them into the group.
I think in Laura, it reminds me of a really easy way to extract kind of a common ground or a common, community likelihood is to survey. Part of our survey was, okay, what's sacred about the office that you miss or that you just cannot live without? The responses from that then allowed us to channel what we would then do. So if it was all about celebrations of marriages, pregnancies, all that, if it was a happy hour and we surveyed, how would you like to celebrate these things? And we did a survey and 90% said happy hour. Well, then we kind of know what to host to bring as many people as we can together. So a lot of that survey questionnaire can really help towards what those events and types of events would be. Health and wellness was a huge part of what's sacred about being home. And so we knew we'd have an incredible participation rate of this industry event, this workout challenge, is because we know it was important to the majority of the staff. Again, staying authentic and true to the culture and what really is important to the majority of the workplace. So it's just kind of one tip that you can do management-wise to kind of extract and kind of pull what those common threads are that really bring a lot of the people together socially and naturally.
Right. Shahana, we have a bit of an insider question here from Lauren Hemphill, who says, "Did you keep the slide in the office?" That sounds germane to the topic we're talking about now.
We have a large slide that goes from one floor to the lower floor, and it's still there. We're still going to use it. I'm sure it's a little dusty right now, so somebody's going to have to volunteer to wear like a blanket and dust it, go down and dust it. And then we might have to figure out some way to sanitize it. But yeah, that's been a fun, certainly talking point of our new space.
I have a couple of quick, more sort of infrastructural or technical questions here that, I'd just love to get some quick responses to. Michelle Stilley asks, what transitions are being considered for restrooms or kitchen spaces or cafe spaces, hands-free faucets or flush valves, or maybe incorporating restroom traffic management systems within your hoteling management system? So, how do you deal with shared amenities, restrooms or kitchens and things like that? So just some quick thoughts on that, maybe.
In our office, we're planning on, we've gone through so many iterations of our return policy or our return plan. We started at, like I think Laura mentioned earlier, at first we thought we were returning 2 weeks later after we all went home in mid-March. Then we were returning a month later. And, we've, I think, done 10 plans for the reentry at this point. And so, somewhere around December, we said, let's just stop and wait and really just, form the plan based on what the regulations are and guidance is and such when we return. And where we've landed now for when we return is that we will still be doing like a nightly cleaning. It won't be the kind of static cleaning that we were planning on doing on a nightly basis in all of our offices. We were looking at, a cost of around $100,000 a month to be able to do that in our spaces. And it, I think at this point, it has been determined that it's not necessary. We will be doing a lot more just, touch, wiping things down, disinfecting things directly. And then also during the day. So of course at night, but then during the day, we'll have somebody going through and continually wiping things down. And, while that was happening prior, certainly not to the level that we're planning on doing it once we return. Restrooms, we've already had, again, kind of, in most of our offices being newer, most of our offices have like the touch-free already. There are a couple that we're looking at retrofitting and adding those in. And then in the places where we cannot do that or it doesn't make sense, installing, they're making now, it's almost like a Kleenex box of sorts or like a toilet paper roll of sorts that you can attach to the wall, or where there's a door handle or something like that. And you can take out a paper to open the door and then, drop it in the can, that type of thing.
Interesting. Justin, were you going to say something or?
I was just going to say, I think, the pandemic and kind of all the challenges around it, if it were 5 or 10 years, we would probably fundamentally rebuild some of those facilities. But I think to get through this time, it's been more about how do we keep things sparklingly clean, kind of to Shahana's point. I mean, at one point it was electrostatic cleaning, but now it's just, I think as landlords, we just want to make sure that our janitorial crew is keeping up and making sure that things are just really like being minded and that people feel that they're safe, that things are just really clean. So I think that's where our focus has been, rather than sort of really deep infrastructural changes.
Pragya Prasad asks a technical or service question. Are there any considerations for HVAC for more outside air circulation? Because people feel more comfortable with natural ventilation now. Justin, is that something on your mind?
It's an interesting question because we have some buildings with forced air systems and we have some buildings with variable refrigerant systems. And the variable refrigerant systems, for those who are familiar with them, just offer so much better control for individual spaces. And so I think our preferred model, and what we've done in our last 2 office buildings, is natural ventilation by way of operable windows or glass garage doors, like I mentioned earlier, paired up with variable refrigerant HVAC systems, so that you have a high degree of control within each demised office. And so that way you get both the comfort of it was brought up earlier, people being able to set their thermostat to 70 degrees or 68 or 75 or wherever their personal preference is, but on a nice day to just basically, move a whole wall out of the way and just get fresh air in at volume.
Right. And then Lisa Murder asks, are you seeing air purification or architectural walls being requested for those coming back to the workforce? I guess movable walls or flexible systems. Is that something that's on the cards at all? Maybe even for ongoing projects, Abby?
Absolutely. I think now is probably now more so than ever to do kind of those beta tested spaces or to kind of hijack certain things to keep them super flexible, because those demountable systems can be completely transformed over the weekend, for instance. So it is a great solution that we are seeing now so more than ever. And what's interesting is the green walls are part of those demountable systems, so that it can kind of be this all-in-one solution to give people those options. But no doubt do they still have a very strong presence in our industry and continue to do so with the evolution of their design and their capabilities. I think that's an interesting concept when thinking about maybe the best approach of moving forward and thinking about your space is creating some of these little beta testing with something like that, just because you can move them around. So I think it's a great first step.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, were you going to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say we have a current client who we're looking ahead at their future space and analyzing their existing space. And what they did in the pandemic was to build, as a lot of people did, these temporary like plexiglass or glass partitions between their open like bullpen shared office space where they had people in close quarters. And in their new space, the feedback is they really like that. They like, even post-pandemic, they like, even though it's clear and it's still open, they have that visual connection, but they do feel like a little bit more privacy than they had when they were all just like bullpen style in one room together. And so I do think we will see a lot of those clear dividers here to stay, maybe on top of cubicles still. Cubicles, the height has been lower and lower over the years. I think that we'll maintain that solid part to be lower, but we'll have more glass above it so that people do feel like some level of physical protection, but still have that visual connection.
And to your point, Laura, we're now seeing kind of a hybrid workstation / office footprint. So for instance, you might see a workstation, but instead of panel heights, they are glass walls that are 7 or 8 feet high, or they could go all the way, but maybe they don't have a door. Maybe it's a 3-sided smaller office, and maybe it is a 6x8 footprint, but you're still getting the benefits of a more private scenario. So we are kind of seeing these hybrid requests come through of, it's like a mini office. So a lot of clients are requesting to see that. And I think it's really interesting and creative in thinking about an opportunity to kind of blur the lines between a workstation and an office, which could start to address some of those concerns of coming back and the concern for privacy, the concern for cleanliness and have your own space. But maybe thinking about a new size office or a different style.
Yeah, and that sounds like a great space to hot desk too.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I'd love to get one last quick question in to all of you. Just some last thoughts. I'd love to hear, in this year of changes, maybe something that you feel that you've learned, something that maybe has been a new perspective for you. So I'll let you all take a minute or two to think of that, while I just thank again Open Studios for bringing us all together, as well as our sponsors for making today's event possible: Certainty, DuPont, Tedlar, Growy, Mannington Commercial, Kimball, and Versteel. Thank you so much for your support. And thanks, of course, to all the audience who are here. So if anyone is ready to jump in, just a quick thought in terms of something new that's occurred to you in this past year. Just some very quick comments from all of you, and then I think we can close out today's discussion. Abby?
I think the biggest takeaway this last year was empathy. I think the sensitivity that we are all going through this together, and that we all are faced with these challenges, and that there is not an expert here that can give the right recipe that will help everyone at the same rate and the same time. I think, to me, it's the empathy that we are all sharing this together, and we're here to learn from one another, and to stay flexible and patient with one another has been a really welcomed emotion that I've been able to share with my colleagues and my clients. I felt that there's been a deeper rooted relationship formation through that. And I think that that's something that I hope to continue to have with one another and humanity as we get through these really tough times together. So it's been a really nice added layer to my work. It's really made it feel a lot more rewarding, and very much a gratification that I do sincerely hope to continue to have with them.
For me, I certainly, of course, agree with Abby. That's great perspective. One thing that I've really enjoyed is, of course, you miss out on the water cooler connections and conversations that inevitably you have in the office. However, one thing that I've really enjoyed is being able to collaborate with people that are either in other offices or that I wouldn't normally, maybe I just don't sit near them in the office, or we don't have many meetings together. However, I've learned to really lean on people, reach out to people that I wouldn't normally interact with very much. And I think, just professionally, career-wise, it's been a great opportunity to expand your wings, if you will, and expand your network within the company and beyond, actually. But I think, just understand that everybody within your organization has something to share with you or something you can learn from them about. And I think that's been a benefit of, looking at the benefits, one of the big benefits of being at home.
So I think for me, really recognizing that there is a time for solitude and there's a time for community. And I think that maybe it wasn't as starkly clear to me previously that those two things are so critically important and you need to have both in your life. And I think a lot of us had so much solitude that we were able to both recognize what was lacking, meaning what was really important on the community side, but also understanding what was valuable about that and the ability to focus and to think, and what that brought both to our lives personally, but also professionally. And I think on the community side, not undervaluing the creative collisions, maybe in a way that I used to, where I think people are meant to be together and sort of work off of each other. And it's been so exciting to see just almost the palpable energy among our community as our tenants come back to work, run into each other, and start sharing ideas. So not losing one for the other, but valuing both.
Absolutely.
Those are all really great points. And I agree with all of that. When I started working remotely, and I guess before we started working remotely, if you had asked me if I wanted to work from home or would do well working at home, I would have said absolutely not. I was really worried about all the distractions. I was like, I was really worried about not having a good work setup when I was away from the office. But it really surprised me to find that I really loved working from home in a lot of ways because of just being so much more in control of my day. And when I was available to respond to things, I could really have focus time if I shut off my email and my messaging for an hour or two. And really, rather than when I'm in the office, it's hard to signal that you need that quiet time for an hour or two without somebody coming up with a question or something like that. And I loved like my midday walks outside and getting a little more fresh air and some of that balance. But also, like Justin said, you miss those creative collisions and those times. Now, every time I've been together in an in-person meeting or in some kind of gathering, as things are starting to get back to being comfortable meeting in person again, everybody is so excited. The energy is just like, oh my gosh, this feels like normal again. I mean, it really does make you appreciate all the things that we took for granted before. So there's been a lot of surprising things I've learned that I liked, but also some of those things that I never thought about that you miss, that we're really excited to get back once we all can get together in person again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for all your insights and for reflecting on your experiences of the past year and for telling us a little bit about what your plans for the future are. It's been absolutely a pleasure talking to all of you. Thank you all so much. Thanks also to our audience for sticking with us today and for engaging in the conversation. A quick reminder to all the architects, designers, and consultants and developers in the audience, if you are a firm that engages with this idea of well-being or wellness or sustainability in your work, if you're truly invested in making a positive impact on the world, I would encourage you to enter the Metropolis Planet Positive Awards. It's a new awards program recognizing work that makes a positive impact on people and planet. The link to enter the awards is in chat right now. It is easy to enter, and we want to recognize a broad range of work. We want to recognize work at all scales, with different types of impacts from different parts of the country and the world. So please, I would encourage you to go and check it out. And if you feel that you'd like to enter your project, we'd love to consider it for an award. So please do that. Also, today's discussion will be available for viewing on DesignTV by SANDOW on Metropolis's website, as well as the website of Interior Design Magazine and our Facebook pages next Thursday. So take a look out for that at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And then this discussion will also be available for on-demand viewing on our website at metropolismac.com/think tank. So keep an eye out for that as well. It's been a pleasure having all of you today. I hope your own return to work is smooth and is successful, and that you feel supported in the way that you're working in the future. And I hope that all of us have a smooth and successful recovery from this pandemic. I hope that people around the world see better results and a safer future for everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us today, and I hope you have a great evening.